Good evening. This is the Dominance Academy. I'm your professor, Mr. Justin. Let me know if my mic is too low. Had that been mentioned on a previous stream? I'll turn it up if necessary. But yes, thank you for joining me this evening. Let's pull up what we're going to be talking about. It's a common thing, where guys are they're kind of confused about how to go from just like the hey, I'm so and so to having regular conversation. And even if they have regular conversation with a girl, like how to bring that into how to bring that into just regular conversation, or I'm sorry, how to bring that into erotic conversation. And I understand, because you're kind of like trying to bridge something, and the issue is with branding. That's really the issue, because guys will brand themselves as one way but have other desires inside, and then want to switch up. You know what I'm saying? So that's like looking at the outside of like a Nike store, and you're like, oh, I expect Nike sneakers and apparel to be in there. And then you walk in and it's like a cafe, and you're like, what the fuck? Like, I came here for sneakers. Why are the baristas walking around? And so this has to do a lot with it has a lot to do with your branding and being. Well, and then that raises the question, well, why is your branding off? Like, why can't you portray yourself as the sexual person that you are, right? And then that raises the questions of, your fears, your insecurities, and all that good stuff, right? And this is really where the problem begins, because you'll start off going off like, hey, I'm this nice guy, I'm relaxed, I'm I'm just like a regular dude. Well, thank you, Dukalux. Yeah, I'll just I'll turn up my gain a little bit. Maybe that will help. I boosted it a little bit just now. So granted, I'm a coach or whatever. I'm into this alternative lifestyle. All of my socials are like this. And so when a woman sees me, but it's a very like, how do I explain this? It's like a very like over the top example, but I'm basically showing my sexual presence, right? And so when a girl sees this, maybe she sees my Instagram, she's got this idea like, okay, this guy, because of his content, he is a certain way, and he's going to communicate to me probably in a way that I think, right? And that's what I mean about the branding. Like, everything is in accordance with the brand. And that's but you don't have to go as far as someone like myself, with going this full tilt like BDSM stuff, because you may not be into that, for one. But it's just basically not hiding your sexual vibe, not hiding your sexual presence. And I think this is entirely the main sticking point, okay? Because then getting to sexual communication, it's not gonna feel or appear to be out of the blue. It's not going to feel off-brand, or however you're presenting yourself. Okay. But that's not what I'm getting into with this. But I just wanted to put that out there as something to consider with, how you market yourself. And these days, that's pretty much how Instagram is used. It's used in the sense of marketing for, well, for girls, well, marketing for guys, but guys already know this, how girls use it for dating somewhat. But I've been told, like, by many guys that Instagram is one of the best dating apps out there, and I could see why, because you can really, because just the flexibility of adding music and limitless photos, you can really curate it to be much more thorough than the options on a dating app, where they only allow you just a few photos, only so much to write about yourself. I mean, you can do tons of pictures with tons of captions, showing your viewpoints, expressing yourself, really. And it can work out very well. I met my submissive on Instagram, and so, but I previously never really used it as a dating app. I like the notion of, a dating app is like, people know what they're getting into. Like, they're there for a reason. And so the mind is already primed for it. You know what I mean? Kind of like comedy clubs, you're more likely to laugh at certain jokes in a comedy club than you would the very same jokes in a different setting, because the mind is already primed to be like, oh, I'm expecting to laugh because I'm going to a comedy club, right? So it's the same sort of thing. That's my view on the whole view on dating apps. Yeah, they do. Facebook has a dating app built in, and it's like the most bottom of the barrel people. Like, it's just the weirdest looking people. It's as if they just don't wash their face, they don't do their hair, they don't dare working out, they don't do shit. It's just like, hey, this is me in my kitchen eating a ham sandwich. Oh man, yeah, those ladies are awful. And under normal circumstances, you can like lower the age to something between like 21 to 30, and you'll have, like, as a matter of like decent looking women. And typically, if you look above that, there's a huge jump or a huge dip to the appearance of women. It get much more unattractive. Okay, on Facebook dating, that jump isn't so big because the bar is so low. Like, even like the young women, they're not far off in looks compared to the women who are in like their 30s and 40s. It's kind of embarrassing. I don't know why like Facebook draws that kind of crowd. But I actually did meet a number of decent looking and friendly women off of Facebook. So there's that. But certainly not as much as the other ones. So I've got this document here called Words to Wetness. And I don't know, I hope it's not too long. But so yeah, let's get into that. Words to Wetness. So, oh wait, 1 second. What are we doing here? What are we doing? Okay. So, words to Wetness. Most people think dominance is something that you do to a woman. You say the right line, you use the right emoji, you put "sir" in your username or something like that, and boom, she's supposed to melt. And and that's why so many guys end up sounding like bad actors reading a script that they found somewhere on Reddit, right? Real dominance is not what you do. It's how you are when you do anything. It's your baseline, not your costume. So if you strip away the toys, the titles, the scenes, and the role play, what you're left with is the truth. And what does it feel like to be around you? Does she relax? Does she feel like she has, or does she feel like she has to manage you? Is she aroused, or is she dead in the water? Nowhere does that show up faster than over text. Text is brutal because it removes everything that normally helps you. Eye contact, your body language, your voice, your timing, your touch. She can't feel your body. All she has is your pattern of communication. Women are disturbingly good at reading patterns. And but don't let, there's actually like one little part in there that you can use, which is sending voice notes and sending video clips. And this gives like a little added texture to it, but it's still limited compared to when you're in person. So what does the average guy do? He compensates, right? A lot of times, like, he overtypes or he undertypes, right? The guys who say, don't text at all except for logistics. And to those guys, I would argue that the only reason why they're adhering to that, like red pill dating advice is they don't have any other choice otherwise. Either they fumble around or overtext, or they just go very silent, right? So they say, okay, let's just make things simple, and I'll just keep things to logistics only, and then have my communication during the meetup. And that just shows, like, well, you don't know what you're doing, right? Because if you could wield words to stimulate her mind, then why wouldn't you? And so because they're not, that just tells me that they don't have that skill. So what does the average guy do? He compensates. He overtypes or undertypes. He overexplains. He double texts. He tries to sound more dominant, more edgy, more in control than he actually feels. And you can practically smell the effort through the phone. A woman reads that, and on some level, she feels he's trying to get a reaction out of me. And the moment she feels you're chasing a reaction, you've lost ground. Power doesn't chase. Power sets the frame and lets people reveal themselves inside it. Dominance over text isn't about sounding like a dom. It's about not abandoning yourself. That means your answer when you actually have something to say, not because you're anxious, right? You answer because that's just what you do. And you don't send a paragraph when 2 sentences are enough. You don't justify your decisions. You don't explain your standards like you're pitching a Netflix series. You don't fight to keep her attention. You let silence do some of the work. You can be warm, affectionate, playful. Absolutely. Dominance doesn't mean being cold, but underneath all of that, there's a spine. You're clear on who you are and what you're available for and how you expect to be engaged. So a woman who texts you in, say, a bratty way, you don't send a lecture, you don't spiral, you're not outraged that she's not being perfectly submissive today. You just correct or you disengage. You keep it clean, you keep it simple. And that's dominance in text form. You stay the same. In person, everything is louder. And I don't mean in volume, but just in presence. Your nervous system walks into the room before your words do. The way you sit, how you breathe, how quickly your eyes move, whether you fidget, how you react to her emotions. She's already taking notes. Not consciously, just years of pattern recognition humming under the surface. A man who's calm in his body changes the entire tone of the interaction, especially with a woman who wants to give up control. Women like that are often exhausted. They've been in charge of too much for too long. Emotionally, financially, logistically. They've run households, careers, social lives, family dramas, and they're tired of being the one who has to carry everything. So when she meets a man who is actually grounded, it feels like someone finally took the weight off her shoulders. And not because he's loud, not because he's barking orders, not because he's doing anything for her, but because he's already decided how he moves in the world. His decisions don't feel like negotiations, they feel like directions. You see this especially when things get emotional. Let's say she's anxious, spiraling about something, talking in circles. The average guy either tries to fix it, get defensive, or shuts down. The dominant man does something else. He stays present, he holds eye contact, he listens long enough to understand the core of it, then starts bringing structure. Such as, okay, here's what we're going to do. Or, I hear you. This part makes sense. This part is your fear talking. Or even just, stop for a second, breathe. I'm not going anywhere. That's leadership. That's not role play. That's not you pretending to be a character. That's you being the adult in the room. Now layer erotic communication on top of this. A lot of men, they try to jump straight to erotic dominance without having any everyday leadership built underneath. So he's telling her what panties to wear while he can't even follow through on meeting times. He's calling her good girl while his life is a mess. He wants her obedience in the bedroom when she doesn't trust his judgment outside of it. Erotic communication is just your leadership turned toward her body, her arousal, her submission. It's not a different identity. It's the same man, same spine, different channel. So when you tell her, wear the black dress tonight, it lands because she knows you mean it. You say, you're not going to talk to me like that again. It lands because you enforce it. When you tell her exactly how you want her positioned, or what you want her to say, it lands because she already knows you lead in the rest of your life. You pay attention, you follow through, you hold structure. Erotic language without that groundwork usually rings hollow. It gets tolerated for a while because it's exciting, until the rest of him shows he can't actually hold what he's asking from her. So if you want your erotic dominance to be powerful, start with your everyday leadership. Do you keep your word? Do you make decisions? Do you handle logistics without drama? Do you set boundaries? Can you correct her without needing her to like you in that moment? Can you hold tension without rushing to resolve it? If the answer is no, your erotic talk is cosplay. It might feel intense, but it won't be deeply trusted, and it won't last long, and it won't be penetrative. So, let's talk now about the psychology of a woman who truly wants to give up control, because a lot of men get confused here. There are women who like the idea of submission because it's aesthetically pleasing. Collars, rituals, language, bondage gear, vinyl teddies, things like that. Then there are women who feel it as a need in their body. The second type is dangerous, in a good way, because if she meets a man who can actually hold that, she'll go further than he expects. Her submission isn't theater, it's relief. A woman who wants to give up control usually has a couple of things going on internally. First, her nervous system is often tired. She's hyper-responsible. She's used to handling things, anticipating problems, smoothing conflicts. When she says, I want to be led, what she really means is, I want to stop bracing myself all the time. Your job isn't to give her more chaos, it's to give her enough order so that she can finally soften. She can release her grip. Secondly, she's watching you very carefully at the beginning. Not just what you say about dominance. She's watching how you treat other people, whether you flinch when there's conflict, how you handle her no, how you react when she's not perfectly submissive. She's not just deciding, am I attracted to him? She's deciding, can I safely lose to him? Third, her submission will come in stages. She might submit sexually long before she lets go emotionally. She might defer to you on small decisions, but still keep one foot out the door in terms of trust. Don't get fooled by how far she goes in bed. That's not the full measure of her surrender. Look at how much she lets you guide her life, her habits, her patterns, her speech, her posture, the things that she does in life. That's the deeper layer. If you understand that, you stop chasing displays of submission and instead become a man worth surrendering to. You focus less on how do I get her to obey and more on how do I become so solid that obedience feels natural to her. And that brings us to the most important distinctions. Power as baseline versus power as performance. Performance is what you do when you're afraid you're not enough. You talk a little louder, you exaggerate, you posture, you inflate your stories. You throw in extra dominant language to convince her and yourself that you're that guy. You're constantly monitoring her reactions. If she doesn't respond the way you want, you ramp it up or shut down. Baseline power is the opposite. Baseline power says, this is who I am, this is how I lead, this is how I move. You are welcome to join, and you're free to leave. You're not trying to prove anything. You're not attached to her every mood swing. You're not threatened by her emotions. You don't collapse when she's upset with you. You really don't need her presence at all, namely because your cup is full with yourself. So this is why it's an invitation. There's no other option but to invite her, because there's really no space for her that you're expecting her to fill. And a woman feels that. She tests it. Not always consciously, but she'll poke at it. She'll have a bad day, come at you sideways, contradict you, push on your boundaries, not to destroy you, but to see if you're real, to see and test your density. If your power is a performance, that's where it cracks. You either overreact with control, anger, passive aggression, punishment that's more about your ego than her growth, or you underreact. You fold, you appease, you apologize for things you shouldn't, and you abandon your own standards. If it's your baseline, you stay steady. You might tighten your boundary. You might step back. You might correct her directly, but you don't start bargaining with your identity. You don't change who you are to keep her. And here's the good news. Women who want to surrender are relieved when you don't change who you are to keep them. Because that's the moment they see, oh, he wasn't doing this for me. This is actually who he is. That's when the trust begins to deepen. That's when her submission stops being a performance of her own and becomes instinctive. So if you want power dynamics without role play, this is the path. You stop thinking dominant as a role and start thinking of it as a standard of existence. This way, the way you text, the way you speak, the way you correct, the way you make plans, the way you hold yourself in her chaos, those are all expressions of the same spine. Over text that looks like brevity, clarity, not chasing, not justifying, and not abandoning yourself, nor is it explaining yourself or feeling uncomfortable or shame around expressing your own sexuality. In person, that looks like a calm nervous system, solid eye contact, steady breathing, and a willingness to make decisions and hold tension. Erotically, that looks like directing her body and attention from the same grounded place you direct from in life. Not as a separate persona you put on to feel powerful, then in the morning you go back to your regular self. Psychologically, that means understanding that a woman who wants to surrender is scanning for your consistency, your integrity, and emotional stability, not just intense words. And underneath all of that last piece, your power has to be your baseline. It has to be who you are when no one's watching, not just who you cosplay when you're sexting. So when you get there, the dynamic doesn't need to be fanfare. You don't have to announce it. You don't have to force her to see it. She feels it. And often, before either of you puts a label on anything, she's already adjusting to it, checking in with you, asking your opinion, softening under your eye, giving you more and more influence over your life, or over her life. That's power dynamics without role play. You begin so deeply rooted in who you are that the rest of the dynamic forms around you, not because you demanded it, but because you made it the safest, most natural place for her to be. And there we have it. So, and that's really where like true erotic communication comes from, because it's not like, when you're starting with that baseline that I mentioned, anything that comes out of you is coming from that same spine. It's not something that you're trying on as an experiment. And if it feels like you are, that means that your communication isn't in line with who you think you are. Or you're trying something on, you're putting on that costume, it's cosplay. And and a lot of it, of course, it has to do with, understanding yourself, accepting yourself as a sexual being, not feeling ashamed of your sexuality. Like if you masturbate or if you watch porn and you feel guilty after that, you have a poor relationship with your own sexuality. Unless you're a raging addict, which I don't think most guys are, then if you feel that guilt, you've got an issue that you need to work out, an issue with your relationship with self. And so once that's gone, you're free to communicate. So, like for example, like my current sub, when I was first meeting her, like I mentioned, when I first met her, she was just watching my stories, and I just checked who it was because I just saw like a little section. I just saw like her face, like part of her nose, and then like a bit of her eye, maybe her lip, just a very like a section of her face. Oh no, there was no eye. So it was like nose and then like cheek and mouth. And I was like, well, what's with this chick? The profile was locked. And I'm like, all right, well, let me just see what's up. And I made a friend request. She accepted not too long after. And I looked, and there was like no photos of herself. I'm like, all right, well, either this girl has, is very modest, or she's, or she has very low self-esteem. And, there were some photos of her, but it was like fully clothed. It was like at something, like an event or something like that. It was no showing off. Okay. And if it was like focused on her, it was like her from the back, like it wasn't like some full frontal look at me sort of thing. But at any rate, I went into her DMs and I said, you would look, I think I said you would look really cute sitting on daddy's lap. All I saw was like just a couple of photos, like I didn't care, right? Because that's just how I am. And I wanted to see what her reaction would be, because like, first of all, like that's a very like authentic thing for me to say. Secondly, it's also a test, because she could say, who the fuck do you think you are talking to me like that? And that's fine. She's welcome to, any girl, she's welcome to have that reaction. And that's perfectly fine. But it would give me the information that she's just not that attracted, right? She has probably like her ideals are greater than her attraction to me. And that's perfectly fine, okay? But I would just end the conversation there. Then or there could be shyness, right? And you'd be like, hey, like that's like, oh my gosh, something like that. Or there could be banter, some playful banter, and she could swat the ball back. And then we have some banter going on, which is also fun, but not exactly the submission that I like. But I know underneath that there is a submissive girl. They just like to kind of play first, right? A little bit of wrestling involved, and that's fine too. And then what she did kind of astounded me, and she was like, I think she said something along the lines of like, do you think it's a little early for that? And so it was like sort of like denial, but not, because it was like no, not yet, right? And I said to myself, okay, so she's down, but she like kind of wants to move slow. And from there, like all of my communication remained as I am. So like I was reading, like everything exudes, what I'm about. Okay. So, it's like if she says something that I know needs correction, I correct it right then and there. In the same way that if, like with the same kind of freedom of me saying you would look cute sitting on daddy's lap, this is, with that same kind of fearlessness of like, if she says something that is incorrect, I'm going to correct her. Like as far as like either like grammar or how she's speaking to me or something like that. And it doesn't include like special rules. It's not including like requiring her to say sir or anything like that. Excuse me. Okay. Pretty okay with my sexuality, but my self-esteem and confidences are all over the place because of my schizophrenia. Yeah, that's got to be tough. I don't know what that's like living with schizophrenia, but a lot of guys are in the similar place, where they're knowledgeable, like they know they like what they like, but they also have a problem with self-esteem and confidence, minus the schizophrenia. So you're not alone in that part. And the problem is that, like, that just shows that there's a certain level of self-rejection, right? Because it's not like there are people telling you about yourself to have low self-esteem. It's not like you're walking down the street and someone's like, you're a fucking loser. You know what I mean? Maybe they think it or whatever, but all of the things that bring about the self-esteem issues is all done by the self. It's all just listening to the narratives that the self has adopted. So, because no one else is doing it, no one else is putting these messages out there. It's just the self. And so if you've got low self-esteem, it's because you're doing it to yourself. No one's dragging you down. You know what I mean? Oh, and Dukalux, this isn't for you. This is for like anybody who has self-esteem and confidence issues. Just with you having schizophrenia as a condition, like that just makes it even harder to wrestle, I imagine. But yeah, a lot of this comes down to that internal dialogue and the relationship to self. And this is part of the branding. Okay, so imagine a business where they argued amongst themselves, like the people who were running it. They argued amongst themselves of what their brand identity was. Like, they never really landed on anything. Maybe they landed on something for like a couple weeks, and then it just shifted and it was something else, and it just all was like flowing around, and nothing ever really got carved in stone. Okay, and this would make things very difficult, because that's the base, right? For like a company, their branding is like, that's like their base identity. And so if that's in flux constantly because the team can't really decide on anything, then everything that comes off of that, whether it's a product or a service or what have you, how they present themselves to the world, this is going to be all mixed up as well. It's going to look uncertain. It's going to look inconsistent. And so you have to get the consistency with yourself first and not second guess what you're about. And that begins with the internal narratives. It begins with how you speak to yourself. And if there's parts of you that are not part of the team, basically saying like, I don't like you, I'm critical, I'm judgmental, that sort of thing, like that's somebody who's part of the team that's not, they're there, but they're not like a participant that moves things forward. They're kind of holding things back. Then they're not part of they're not being a yes man, right? As part of the family or part of the team. And so you have to observe this, right? And become aware of how you talk to yourself, because that's an indication of how you feel about yourself. Okay. It's just sad that in our lives here, that it's normalized to speak to ourselves this way, to speak negatively of ourselves. And like if you're hanging out with a friend and you're like, hey, what's going on? You look a little upset. And they're like, yeah, man, like I was rushing to work and I was supposed to take this folder to work and I forgot it. And I got to work and, my boss was pretty upset because it kind of set things back. And man, I'm such an idiot, right? I'm so fucking stupid. Your friend would be like, yeah, man, I get that, It's so normalized to talk down to oneself, all right? But if you have a high opinion of yourself, if you say anything good about yourself, it comes off as being boastful. It comes off as being deluded. It comes off as being, like in your own fantasy world or full of yourself. Isn't that strange? How like the negative narrative is completely normal to hear, and it seems justified. But if you do the opposite, you're looked at as like you're crazy. which is actually crazy. Like, that doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever. But that consistency of your team, the people, like, I guess, like the various aspects of yourself, if they're all together and there isn't someone's in there doing the self-rejection, the criticism, the judgment, that sort of thing, then that increases the confidence. It does away with the insecurities, the low self-esteem, because you're accepting everything, okay? And this is what allows you to then show up more authentically. This is what allows you to communicate more authentically. So that when you say, and I don't mean this like this has become like this YouTube trope. You go on the dress, like, I want you to wear this dress in this color, blah, blah, blah. And because it sounds good, it sounds cool, it sounds dominant, right? It sounds like a leader. But do your insides flinch when you actually do it? Or do you just love repeating this shit because you hear it on YouTube? You know what I'm saying? Like, this is the difference. Do you flinch inside? Like, if you even muster the courage to speak that directly. You're going to meet me here at this address at this time. I'd like you to be wearing a short, tight black dress with matching heels, jewelry at your discretion, and have that just roll off as comfortably as you are ordering a sandwich at the deli. That's really how it should be. And she can feel the relaxed, calm conviction, the relaxed confidence in that. Right? And then when you meet up, say maybe it's a bar or something like that, and you pull out the chair and you say, sit here. Like, you're actually telling her to sit down. You're telling her where to sit. Okay? Having that sense of like no second guessing, no self-doubt, right? Because it makes sense as part of the branding, right? Which you've established by not having any self-rejection. All the team members are on the same team. They're all working in unison. And then this is what allows you to have the confidence is to communicate erotically. And this is very important. Excuse me. Stephen, apologies. Been in and out of the stream, but when you don't have to apologize for shit. But when in solitude, what's the difference between performative dominance when in solitude? What's the difference between performative dominance to be dominate versus actually building to be dominate to self? I don't know. I'm gonna hope that English is not your primary language. But if it is, you need to work on your grammar. First, dominate the way you speak and use punctuation. Easy stuff that you learn in school. But if this is not your primary language, then that's okay. But performative dominance, to be dominant versus actually building to be, well, performance is like performance between like performance and authentic dominance. I guess that's what he's asking. So performative is when you're not that guy and you're trying to be of what you think it is because you lack education. And the thing is that if you dig around online, if you do research, if you read, if you get a book on like the history of BDSM, if you get books on the psychology, like actual psychology books about the psychology behind power dynamics, really educate yourself so that now you become knowledgeable, you become somewhat of an authority on the matter, right? That's the difference between an authority and a non-authority, is the authority has knowledge. That's it. And then the person who's not an authority, they have a lack of knowledge. And so, really educate yourself so that you're not working off of the things you see in porn, the things you see, like on the stupid books that you can get on Amazon, like How to Dominate a Woman, and it like shows a dude, you're like holding a whip, on the cover. Like, and those books are terrible. These books are just absolutely awful, because they just kind of skim off this on the surface of power dynamics and BDSM, and in a way that's very expected. It'll say like, well, if you wanna like dominate, your woman, you want to have like a power dynamic relationship, you need to first establish a set of rules. It's like, yeah, but are you going to address at all who is setting up the rules, and are they capable, or are they qualified? And I don't mean qualified in terms of like having a knowledge set, but are they qualified inside? Or are they needy? Or are they scared? Or are they still harboring a lot of anger and rage from their past, from their childhood, or what have you? Okay, that's being qualified or being unqualified. Are they grounded already? Are they a pillar? Right? And that's the difference. So they're not, then they've got all these things where it's a lot of coping because of the self-image problems, coping because of the lack of self-respect, the lack of self-love. And these copes are kind of like placed on the form to kind of hopefully convince the self and the other that you're cooler than you actually are. But the only reason why you think you're not cool is because you've learned to not like who you are in the first place. And that's really where all of this shit starts. But this is, you get that shit sorted, and this is what allows for commands and sexuality to just roll off the tongue. Because you're not afraid, because you're no longer using it like the concept of other as the measuring stick for self-value. I can say whatever I want, and she can either love it or hate it, or she can be neutral about it. And so I figure if I continue to show up authentically, there's going to be somebody who's like, I like that. And that really turns me on. That gets my gears going. That makes my pussy wet. That makes me think. That shifts my perspective, or whatever. And then that, because that's the only way, right? Because you don't want to discover your truth well after the fact. And that's typically what happens. Where you kind of have a performance going on for a little while to get the girl. And then you can't keep that performance going indefinitely. Eventually the mask will fall off, and she'll see it, and she'll be like, what the fuck is that? Wait a second. You mean to tell me that for the past 4 months you've been putting on a show? When is it ever going to stop? It's just like, she's not even, the phone doesn't even ring. She just picks up her phone, pretends, I'm sorry, I just got a call. My mom's sick. I gotta go. Her phone didn't even fucking ring. But that said, I'm still glad that I'm a dude. I really wouldn't want to have to. I wouldn't want to be a woman and have to deal with just the endless streams of like broken, misguided, just lost, hurt, angry, confused males that's just inundating my world. Purely if they wanted to get things from me. Sex, or a means to feel better about themselves. It's like, oh my God, isn't there just one dude out here who doesn't need me, but also doesn't treat me like shit? Like, that's really what they're after, right? Doesn't need me and doesn't treat me like shit. Because there are guys like that she'll come across that don't need her, but just really like kicks her to the curb like some old rusty can, And for some girls, that really turns them on. Let's be serious here. Um, but under normal circumstances, no, they don't want to be kicked down the road like an old can. Um, maybe just sometimes and in play or in intention. But the reality is that they want to have that other half there because, as we've discussed in class before, that they've got that little girl inside. They've got that little girl who just really wants to feel safe and cherished and held and owned, right? Protected. And, of course, the bad girl inside, we can call her whore or whatever you want. But yes, she will enjoy not being needed, the feeling. Because here's the thing, and I can tell you this as being a parent, okay? And for those of you who might have kids listening to this, when you're needed, it's like somewhat of a burden, okay? Your awareness goes to the other. You're considering what they need. You're considering, what it is behind their needs, like asking for their needs, and this is really okay, so what's up, little one? So this is why, like, both of those things are needed, but you can't access those if you're scared. Yeah, you can't access those things if you're scared. You can't and she'll feel these things. Like, that's the thing. Like I mentioned in the in the article that women have this tremendous ability to read you. And it's just from they're disturbingly good. That's what I said. They're disturbingly good at reading patterns and just picking up on certain subtle behavior shifts because they had to deal with this. They had to kind of build this skill in order to survive, because they lacked the brute strength. So they can read that shit, and of course, like, you shouldn't be trying to fix your self-perception, your self-respect, your self-love. You shouldn't be fixing these things so that you may become attractive. Okay, you should just be like, I can't stand living this way. I can't stand living in a way where I don't feel comfortable in my own skin, where I wish I was somebody else. I wish I looked different. I wish I felt different or thought different, or just showed up in the world different. I don't like this part of myself. Like, that's got to be dealt with. I mean? Like, you can't lead somebody from there. And sure, you might be able to get sex and you might be able to get into a relationship or something like that, but it's going to pale in comparison to what things could be, because you can only lead and influence to the degree at which you're capable, and the relationship to yourself indicates that. So if there's a high level of self-rejection, then that puts a huge limiter on how much and how far you can lead with, and how deep and how intensely. I don't have kids at the moment that I'm aware of, but I'm an uncle to multiple kids. And that is almost the same, except the responsibility, for sure. Just if you're around, like, any, it could be, little young people, it could be very old people, it could be injured people, it could be sick people. Like, if you're around people who have needs that you are, tending to some degree, you can feel and understand the burden of that. And by just having that there, it lessens your ability to fully express, because part of your awareness and your behaviors, your choices, are with consideration to those people. Okay. And so that's why it becomes burdensome to a woman when she is encountered by a guy who has neediness, where he wants something from her, and he's needy either from a physical standpoint or he's needy from an emotional standpoint, and both of those things are massive turnoffs. That doesn't say her body doesn't wake up from that and say, my goodness, I must be filled with his seed now. I must feel this man's milk inside me as soon as possible. It doesn't work that way. And so you can put on a show, and this is the performative dominance that Stephen was talking about. The performative dominance or the performative masculinity or what have you, this can work enough to kind of get her to put her guard down enough for you to have sex with her. Okay. And guys they'll run with that, right? Because they lack an understanding of how much more that there possibly could be. Because, and so in his mind, that's the ultimate thing. Okay. But especially these days, it's nothing for a woman to open her legs. It almost means nothing. Long ago, it used to mean okay, this girl's easy, this girl's a whore or whatever. But that's a very old way of thinking. These days, sex is almost, if you're not a complete moron or a complete loser, or you look like Quasimodo, sex is not that hard to come by. Okay. Versus say 100 years ago. You know what I mean? So, just because there were such high expectations on people's social behavior and their social presence. And so, compared that back then to these days, it's oh my God, but if that's what you're getting and you think, oh my gosh, that's submission, it's not, because it's so easily accessible at this point, comparatively. Okay. I know some guys are going to be are you fucking kidding me? I haven't talked to a girl in I don't know how long, or I'm 30 years old and I'm a virgin or what have you. I've actually got one of my clients, one of my newer guys, he's 30 or late 20s or something like that, and he hasn't had sex. And he's I'm a virgin. I'm listen, first of all, men can't be virgins, right? The whole word was designed to describe a woman's body, not a man's. Okay, it just means you haven't had sex, and really, it's not that big of a deal. It really isn't. It's just a little wet hole the size of a quarter. It's not a big deal at all. Some of the little wet holes are smaller than a quarter. Some are a little bit bigger than a quarter, but regardless, it's just still a little wet hole. But when you have the conviction, so all right, so I was talking to one of my guys, was it earlier today? Yeah, I think it was earlier today. And he had the weekend, maybe last weekend or something like that, with his girlfriend or something. And he had written some erotic short scene, I guess. It was maybe 3 paragraphs long. And he sent it to her. And he's pretty comfortable with that. But the thing is that he didn't have any transition. And I was so tell me about what the communication was before that, just before you sent it. And it was a completely different reality. Okay. He didn't tease her mind. He didn't kind of marinate her consciousness. Okay. To basically prep the mind for the incoming major shift from just regular day-to-day stuff into more eroticism. And so what happened, he just had regular speech, and he was at work and he was rushing, and he just kind of dropped it on her. I think it was the first paragraph, and then a little bit later he's maybe within like 10 minutes, he sent the next one. And then a few minutes later, he sent the last paragraph. And so this was like a very abrupt shift for her. Okay. Much like if you were to just start fucking her right away. Okay. Without any kind of warm up. Like, of course, yes, these things can happen, where you're over at her place, she's in the kitchen making you food or whatever, and you look over at her, you're like, damn, she looks so good and like nothing but that apron, and you just walk up behind her and just fuck her like immediately, and not even to the point of orgasm, like just to show dominance and appreciation for what you're seeing. You liked it that much, right? But that's a very special circumstance, right? And it's not about pleasure and having sex. It's about like making a statement. It's making your artist statement. But anyways, so but under normal circumstances, having sex that way is pretty abrupt. Okay, women like that nice long ramp up to a nice smooth takeoff into the upper atmosphere. And so he didn't do any of this, right? He didn't like warm up her mind. He didn't like gently stroke the folds, the soft fleshy folds in her mind first, right? He just kind of like dropped it on her. And so I talked to him about that, about how he could have done that. And then just before he sent these things, maybe she says like, what did you do today or whatever, or he could just kind of like lay out the lure and say, well, I worked out a little writing today. He said, well, what do you mean? It's like, oh, just this little like erotic short story, nothing big, And by this time, she's already kind of like shifting her awareness towards eroticism because of the playfulness, or I forget like what his situation was with the regular conversation, but I told him like how he could have established either like dominance or playful sexuality or whatever. And so it's preparing the mind in that way. And so then kind of tease her, like tease the anticipation out, just in the same way where, say she's lying down on the bed, she has her legs spread, you're either like on her side or you're on top of her, but not laying on top of her. Okay, you're using your hands and you're touching her body, you're stroking her thighs, like going all the way up, and back down the inside of her thighs and so on. You're kind of like maybe kissing her chest and like around her breasts and things like that. And you're purposely not touching any of the typical erogenous zones. So you're purposely avoiding like, her pussy lips. You're purposely avoiding her nipples. Maybe you're purposely avoiding her neck, or just kind of going up to it just a little bit, but not lingering. Maybe going up to kiss her, but not kiss her, like stop a little bit and make her want to close that gap. Okay. So you do the same thing, the same kind of teasing, but with your communication, right? So you're not just quickly getting to the thing. And so I told him like, listen, you can say that you've got this thing, and then say, well, I don't know, you're at work, like, I don't like, and it might not be the right time. And then she'd be like, no, I want to see it, because you've already started rubbing that pussy in her mind. And so then you send her the first thing, the first paragraph, right? And this is what I was telling him. And then she reads it and things like that. And of course, she's going to want to know what happens next. Okay. And then say, well, okay, I'm in a playful mood. So if you want to hear what happens next, I want you to go into the bathroom and rub your pussy for me. And I would like you to show me the wetness. I want to see your excitement. Okay. Convince me to send you the next part. Show me a picture of your wet fingers. And then now she's doing these things, and now you're creating like this whole thing rather than just plopping a story down for her to read. Okay. And this is the difference. And then you like, it's a good girl or whatever, let her read the second part. Okay. And then you can kind of cause whatever sort of tension you want. You can stretch that wire, okay, to make it tighter and tighter. That's up to you, how much you want to play with it, how much you want her to feel that tension. So I explained all this to him, and he admitted that he was rushing. He wasn't really thinking about this, and it was also because of his insecurity around it. Because what was in it was something a little bit outside of his usual form of communication, and within that, he mentioned, what is it, like a stupid hole or something like that, right? Instead of like the common stuff like a slut or a whore or whatever, he called her a stupid hole. And it was, I think it was a short story like involving her as a character, okay? And she read that and she got a little offended. She got a little kind of like turned off, okay? And I explained to him, because she wasn't emotionally brought into the story. She wasn't emotionally brought into the text communications. You had like this very regular form, and then you dropped the story like out of the blue, and within that was this very like unusual context or unusual title that she's never heard before from you. And I told him, I guarantee if you had her, prepared, you had her brain was marinated and tenderized, and then brought up into certain levels of arousal to the point now you're giving her these parts, and then she reads that part. Now the words don't really matter because her emotions are already in this particular state, right? Her body is already aroused, right? You had her rubbing her pussy in the bathroom at work, so her body is in a particular state of arousal, okay? And it'll be different for every girl. Like, some with that, they'd be extremely aroused. She'd have to change her underwear, and then some might be a little bit, and then some in between. Like, every girl is different. Also, depending on like where she is on her cycle, okay? So let's just go to the extreme, and let's say she gets very turned on. Let's say she's, within like the first few days of her ovulation phase, and she's extremely turned on. She's extremely wet. Now her being called like a stupid hole within the context of this thing, after all the ramping, the psychological shifting, and then laying the story, transporting her into this other small reality. Now hearing that phrase is totally different because her body is already there. Her body's already in the feeling where that would be, I wouldn't say like appropriate, but it wouldn't be seen as inappropriate. So it's only because her emotions and her body were not in a state of arousal. And that's why it stood out so much as being called, being offensive, being called a whole. So that's just stuff to really take into consideration, is you have tremendous power with your words as a man. And I think I mentioned this the other night, how you can create and you can destroy with your words with a woman. And maybe she won't show you on the surface because girls are trained very much to like control how they're perceived. So you could utterly destroy her on the inside and she will barely show it on the outside. You could make her extremely aroused, but she will keep herself composed, right? Because they get trained very, very young to like keep their shit together in public, right? Especially because like public perception is everything. It's really, really important. So you don't want to bring embarrassment into things, but that's why stuff like when there's trust and you are able to communicate in a certain way, that the embarrassment is actually a turn on. So that's why I said, like, just generally speaking, for a girl to go like, rub herself in the bathroom at work, like there's a bit of embarrassment with that. Like embarrassment that they're actually listening to the guy telling her to do this and she's doing it, Like there's some embarrassment in that, but it's like this fun, erotic, crackling with energy sort of embarrassment. And it's not like true, like saddening embarrassment. And maybe there is like a touch of that, but that's not like the base emotion, okay? Because if there wasn't a bit of that, then it wouldn't be embarrassment. So there's a bit of that shame, there's a bit of this guilt, just like kind of sprinkled over the situation. But that's enough. That's enough seasoning to really like shift it into something else, something more complex, you know. And this, you know, like it comes down to like also experimenting with your palate. You know, speaking of like seasoning, experimenting with your palate, because, you know, let's say you're learning about food, and you're gonna have to experiment. You're gonna have to make things that don't taste good. And so in that sense, I'm proud of my client who he decided to just step out on a limb and just say fuck it. Like, granted, it was ham-fisted. He wasn't being mindful. He wasn't really thinking too much, okay? But that's also a good thing, that he wasn't thinking too much. And he totally fumbled it. You know, he fumbled the ball. And but you have to be willing to have that happen if you want to get good. Like, if you want to get good at expressing your authenticity, if you want to get good at dominance, you're going to have plenty of times where it fucks up. It completely fucks up. You know, you just kind of have to hope that nobody gets injured in the process. You know, there was this one girl that I was with, submissive of mine, and we had somewhat of a lengthy impact session. And so there's many different types of impact, okay? But generally speaking, it goes into like two categories, flexible and stiff, right? So the flexible category is like, you know, flexible rods, right? So that's kind of in between, whips, floggers, you know, towels, right? I want to try this one. I saw this. It was with this like very like traditional Japanese like BDSM house. Like, it was a Japanese dungeon. It was really cool because like everything was made out of like big chunky wood, just very rough hewn cut big blocks of wood, making the apparatuses to kind of like tie the girl up and all this stuff. Really cool stuff. But anyways, so the dom, he had like a towel, you know, those maybe, I don't know, maybe like 24 inches long, something like that. I don't know what that is in centimeters. And it was wet, but it wasn't like sopping wet, like dripping, but it was definitely like wet. Submerged it and probably like grabbed it, like kind of squeegeed out most of the moisture, but it was still heavy from the moisture. And he was like whipping her back with it, you know, in this very like wet, floppy, like it was like a cross between like a thud and a sting. Okay. You know, he was like hit like on the top of the head, in the face, on her breasts, her back. So I really got to try that. I've never used like a damp towel, you know. But anyways, so there's the flexible and there's the stiff. All right. And so I was using a charcuterie board that I had gotten. Pardon me. So yeah, I was like, I think I was at the grocery store, you know, and sometimes the grocery stores, you know, at least in Brooklyn, like up above, they'll have like shelves and stuff above the food, and they'll have like, you know, cooking utensils and things like that. And I saw this wooden charcuterie board, and I was like, damn, like if I kind of like sanded the handle a little bit so it didn't have that bulbous handle and just made it flat, that looks like a good paddle for spanking. It was like kind of thick, you know, about maybe like a half-inch thick, not too big. I'm like, I want to try that. And so I had this impact session with this particular sub, and I wasn't thinking, right? I didn't realize, okay, that I knew, but I wasn't mindful about it, that stiff impact, especially thick tools like a charcuterie board, the impact goes into the flesh. It goes deeper. Okay, so those vibrations and things like that goes deeper into the muscle tissue versus like, say, a crop, like a riding crop, or a whip or a flogger, the things with like leather straps or things like that, the impact from these remains relatively on the surface. And that's why it like stings so much. Okay. It's very stinging, sharp sort of feeling of the impact. With the, the wooden things and such, the stiffer tools, they thud. Okay. And the thicker it is, the heavier it is, the deeper the thud. It has more bass kind of. And so I whacked, it was on her bottom, and it created some bruises. Okay. And I was like, oh, interesting, bruises. Because you never know, like some people, they don't bruise at all, like no matter what you do. And other people, you like touch them relatively hard with your finger and they bruise up immediately. It's like dark, and like then it turns green and shit. You're like, damn, like all I did was just touch you. So she was like kind of in the middle. And, after the session, I started noticing the color change was getting like dark, and I'm like, okay, I gotta stop. Okay. And then I gave her like proper aftercare, used some, ointments and things like that. Arnica cream or arnica gel is really good for this. I prefer the cream, but, you can just get a tub of it on Amazon. Look for arnica cream, and it's like this topical pain relief and muscle relaxer. All right. So really good for bruises, sore muscles, like after say training in the gym. You have some DOMS, the delayed onset muscle soreness, and it helps relieve that sort of thing. But I found it's also good for post impact play. And then this is kind of making a long way around to me making mistakes. And then this turned into a larger injury, because what happened was that deep impact went super deep into the musculature, into her ass, and caused the glute medius. It's like, so it kind of like wraps around the sides of your glutes. Okay. The glute max is like kind of directly behind where the largest area is. And these are kind of like stripes that are on the sides a little bit. It affected those and caused them deeply to lock up. And so she was having just tremendous stiffness. And so she had to, and it took months to undo because there was so much tension there. And she was going to like acupuncture, she was going to massage therapist, and she was going to a physical therapist just to undo this stuff. And like, I felt so bad. Like I felt bad. I felt responsible. I felt embarrassed. And it meant it also meant no impact play for months, at least on that part of her body. But like, still, I didn't do anywhere because when you're engaging in impact play, the body goes through like types of tension. Okay. Just as we normally would, like you kind of like brace yourself and your body reacts and kind of has like a jump and like the muscles flex slightly. So it's going to affect those areas that hurt, even if I'm not hitting that area, because just the surrounding muscles and things like that are just tensing, nervous system and all that bullshit. So I was like, all right, I'm not going to be engaging in any impact play until this is healed. And it took months of that shit. And because I made a mistake, I was not mindful. I wasn't paying attention. Okay. And it's just a lesson. Like that's you have to. And, and I paid the price, and she paid the price of my lack in leadership, so, but these days, typically I don't really like the thuddy stuff. I like the whippy, cracking sort of impact play, that leaves stripes. So I like whips. I like leather tools. I like a switch, a switch or a very thin cane. I was, by my sub, I was given a traditional, Asian style cane. It's very thin, and it's a thin bamboo, kind of flexible. And yeah, you can, you swing it through the air and you get very, very precise sort of tool. But just know that regardless of what it is, okay, it doesn't take much force at all to produce pain. I mean, unless they've got a very high pain threshold, but I'd say like under normal circumstances, she's not some pain princess or something, that it takes very little. Like, and you'd be surprised. And what you should do is test on yourself. So any kind of tool you have that has to do with impact or any other sort of like so-called unpleasant sensation, be it like, cold or heat or electricity, soft or firm impact tools, you should test these out on yourself, like on your thigh, and you'll see like how very little it takes to cause pain on yourself, so because maybe in your mind, BDSM is like really hauling off on things, and it doesn't take much. You could take that cane and just do like little taps of like bamboo cane, or a rod, like a plastic rod. Like I've got one that's somewhat flexible, made out of carbon fiber, and man, like it doesn't take much, not at all, Yeah, it's like the wood balls dropped, as Steve would maybe say. I really don't know what that means. I've never heard him say that. But yeah. But as I say in all these shows, like, all this stuff is greatly connected. Is greatly connected to one another. And it always comes down to the relationship that you're sharing with yourself. If you've got an issue with that, or you're confused about like what the fuck I'm talking about, or how do you go about changing that sort of thing, just get in touch with me. Go on to the website, thedominance.academy.com. You can email me directly from the site, or you can book a call. The first one is free. It's in the top right of the main landing page. And just want to tell you guys that everything, actually, I didn't reduce just the coaching calls, but so my tutorials and to become a student, they've all been reduced in price until December 26th. So if you want to catch these discounts, head on over to the site and check out what I've got going on there. If you got questions about any of the things, send me that email or book a call. We can go in on what's going on there. But really, I don't think this topic here needs to be driven home much more. No, thank you, Danny. He says to guys calling in with little bass in their voice that they have to let their balls drop from their stomach. Oh yeah. I just don't know what you meant by woods balls dropped, right? Anyways, probably just a joke that I'm not picking up on. But yeah, I don't think there's really much more to say about this, because I'm sure guys will come to this thinking like, ooh, how am I gonna get to understanding erotic communication? And the thing is that like once you're grounded in yourself, it's really fucking easy because you no longer give a shit. And then it just comes down to you being comfortable in your creativity and just saying what you want to say, typing what you want to type, getting on video or the voice notes, and it's not about like, oh, I'm going to show myself that I am comfortable enough by risking this. Okay. Like if it feels like a risk, well, then you're not there. And it doesn't mean you shouldn't do anything, but don't expect any kind of outcome, right? Just be open to whatever kind of outcome happens. Because eventually your communication is going to be, your communication is always going to be the most vital aspect of your dynamic. The most vital aspect of your relationship is your communication as the leader. Imagine if your boss couldn't communicate the things that they wanted done very well. Like imagine a lieutenant or a general not being able to communicate orders very well. People were confused, right? Mayhem would happen, okay? As like, imagine a movie director who's not being clear. The actors would be completely confused. Everybody would be confused. So it's important that in order to be clear, you have to very much embrace every aspect of yourself. You must not have a terrible inner dialogue. There must be no judgment, no attachment to your sense of self that is suffering, okay? Because I think about like the movie director, how well things would go if they were communicating, but they were full of self-doubt. In their head, they're like, man, I can't believe you think you can make this movie? Are you kidding? You are awful. You're not fooling anybody. Everyone knows that you suck, and nobody here on the set respects you. You are a fucking hack. Like, imagine how well things would work out while he's wrestling with himself internally while giving commands externally. It would be awful. So you can't have resistance inside you. Just as that director I described, that's resistance. He's resisting himself. There's another aspect of the self that's pushing against, what you're doing. Saying, that's not you. You're a loser. You can't do this. And so everything has to be in alignment. Otherwise, you might get good at projecting some sort of, false branding that just gets people in the door. And then they get there and they're like, this ain't it. This is not what I expected at all. And then maybe you can just kind of pat yourself on the back and be like, well, at least we fucked, right? At least I got at those walls. So, like, that's any sort of achievement, like you really gotta stop looking at women's bodies as vehicles for your achievement. And I know it's tough because, like one of my guys, he grew up, in a world where your masculinity was measured by how many women you got. And so that's what he was dealing with as a teenager. And this can be really, really challenging. Like, it can break you. And a lot of times what this does is it creates the habit of lying for safeguarding the emotional state, for safeguarding the ego. Because, if you tell a lie long enough, eventually you start believing it. Like, you yourself start believing it if you keep telling the lie long enough. And so, for, say, like a young man who's had no experience, and he keeps telling people that he's some kind of player, and he keeps hearing this, his own subconscious, right, saying these narratives, eventually he's going to think that he is. But he's not going to have actual boots on the ground. That's a problem. That's a major problem. Because, you can't fool yourself forever. You can't fool girls forever. I mean, unless you're like truly a sociopath with high levels of, like dark triad type characteristics, which most guys are not. Eventually that mask is going to fall off and you're going to be embarrassed. You're going to be embarrassed and she's going to be disappointed. She's going to be angry at herself, at you, like the whole bit. So, what's up, Efren? Your inner world reflects your outer world. Yeah, many times. Yeah, like I like depressed people. Um, do you see depressed people with great friends? Like not often. And I don't mean like somebody who kind of like slips into depression every now and then, or has, bad days every now and then. Like that's everybody. But someone who's depressed, they're just always, excuse me, it's about time for me to go. But they're always down, right? They're always just like dragging their heels. They're never going to be surrounded by people who are positive, bright, lighthearted, you know, positive, forward thinking, and like plenty of them. They're not. So yeah, you absolutely your outer world will reflect what's going on inside. Stress, strain, and chaos inside, you're likely going to have unpleasant things on the outside. But once you sort of align things, make things calm, you're living congruently. And congruence, by the way, is an alignment between your thoughts, your words, and your actions. So the classic nice guy, he's incongruent. His behavior is like, oh, I'm so nice. Like, let me help you with this. Let me pick up your groceries or whatever, But, and like his words are often in line with that. But his thoughts are totally different. He's got the covert contract. He's saying, oh, I might get some ass out of this, or a kiss, or a date, or something like that. Let's see here. The foundation of most guys is based around what society conditioned them to believe, and that the most valuable things are out there when the truth is inside of you. Yeah. And not only just society, but family, school, religions, all kinds of like institutions, right? That also like media, film, literature, like a lot of these things, they will really, not so much literature, because that's not passive, right? Literature is very active. But yeah, all of those other things are very passive with how they kind of over time shape the clay of your mind. So this is why I say to my guys, people watching this included, that you absolutely have to fortify and safeguard your mind. Like that is that's like primary objective number one, is to secure your mind from influences from all those things. And then to look at the things that have influenced your past, right? And not automatically assume that they're bad, right? Because not all conditioning is bad. But to look at, what did I learn from my parents? Or what did I learn from their lack of teaching? Or what did I learn from their teaching? What did I learn from siblings? What did I learn from school? What did I learn from religion that was around me when I was growing up? And is the things that I've come to believe from these influences about myself, about the world, about religion, about women, relationships, what have you, is what I've learned a justified true belief? Or do I just believe it because that's just how it's always been? Or it's connected to a certain emotion that makes me feel good to have that particular belief? That's not enough, right? Believing in something because it's been part of you for a long time, or it's been around a long time before you, or something along those lines, that's not enough. That's not a justified true belief. That's just, it always was. So yeah, you gotta examine a lot of these things, and some things you might keep. They just make sense. They're in alignment with your codes. And many things you're gonna be like, this just never made sense to me now that I think of it. Dad would always say this or do this. And I like in my core, I disagreed. But I just, as a kid, like I just didn't have the balls to say, you know what, I think you're wrong. Or I disagree. So you kind of like hold on to that. Now you're an adult or a young adult and, feeling that pull or feeling that push, that influence from what dad was saying. And it might have been about you. I've got a guy who his father would, basically call him an idiot. He was like very book smart, very, very book smart. But his dad would be like, yeah, but you got no street smarts. You have no common sense. You're stupid. And so after a long time of that, that starts seeping in. You know what I mean? So it's really important to kind of look at these things and take your time, do some writing about them, and kind of sort out, get a lay of the land a little bit of your beliefs and the narratives you got running in your head. Catch those thoughts where you catch yourself like criticizing yourself and you're like, where did I learn this? Because it's not like something that's innate. You learned to criticize aspects of yourself where you're like, man, I'm fucking stupid, or man, I don't look so good, or man, I'm like, whatever the sort of thing is where that's like cutting language. It's not inherent to a child. At some point they learn this dialogue. So you got to ask yourself, where did I learn this dialogue? Because I didn't make it up. Why would I just out of the blue start thinking these things of myself? So you got to look at this and see, see where you get these narratives from. Because that's the very beginning. Because sometimes you have to clean house before you kind of like fortify a home, Discovery process, as in discovering what you like, what you really want, and why you were born to do to begin with. I think you want to say what you were born to do to begin with. Yeah. And really the only thing that a young male is born to do is just to become a man. That's your single and greatest purpose. It's fine. Like if people are like, oh yeah, I was born to run this, this charity, this not-for-profit, or whatever sort of fucking business or aspiration, but that's kind of stupid, because it's like, oh, well, if somebody didn't have opportunities, or they're born into poverty, or they're born in the wrong part of the world where like, certain parts of India or something like that, where it's just fucking dirt. Like people think that they've seen poverty in the United States and like, oh, this is so bad. Yeah, go to certain parts of India. Like that's poverty. Where people like shitting in the streets. Like without a fucking care in the world. Just teeth falling out of their fucking head. Like sorry, dog's going crazy. But yeah, it's just important to look at all these things. Really important, If you don't look at what you've picked up, you'd be forced to keep repeating them until you come to understand them and make a new belief, which empowers you, and you really are. Yeah, you gotta look. You really gotta look. It's like narratives are a bitch, But on the flip side, it shows how like neuroplasticity. Like we don't have fixed minds. Only certain parts of the brain are absolutely fixed. But a lot of I think like what goes on in your cerebral cortex, that's not fixed. The hindbrain, I think it's like the hippocampus or something like that, where those deep parts where your instincts live, your flight, your fight, your feast, your fuck, like that sort of stuff is not really going anywhere. That's like your lizard brain or your caveman brain. That's not changing. Okay. But those top end, that front of the house sort of stuff, where you think like personality lives, where you think identity lives, where your preferences live, where your beliefs and perceptions live. Like all that shit is completely plastic. It's absolutely moldable. Okay. I think I might have mentioned this before, but I'll mention it again, that the word personality comes from the Latin word persona. And persona is the name of an actual ancient object. And so long ago, when people were putting on performances, they would have amphitheaters, right? And an amphitheater is where the stage is actually low on the ground and the seating is around it and going up. So it's like a bowl. You know, that's an amphitheater if you don't really know. And so people were typically far away from the stage, right? And so the characters, they had these masks. They were very oversized, so the size like a shield, okay? And these were these like exaggerated masks to kind of, so that the people far away could differentiate who's who from a distance. And then these masks had this megaphone attached to the front of it. And the name of this mask was persona. And from that, we got personality. So just know that it's just the mask with a megaphone on it. It's not really who you are, but those things, they're just formulated over time, layer after layer, just like you're putting on varnish, you know? You do like a thin layer, then you like wet sand it, and you do another thin layer, and then wet sand it. And you build up these just thick layers of varnish. And that's really what that mask is formed of. The mask is formed of these things, layer by layer, over time, long periods of time. And then it's just there. And it's there for so long in such a solid form, you're like, oh, this is me. This is just who I am, you know? But it's really just manufactured layers of what we consider our personality or identity, you know? Like I got a guy right now, I mean, I'm a little concerned for him, but you know, he'll be okay. But he's been working a lot with this just concept of identity, and he is kind of breaking a lot of things down, and it's unsettling to him, this notion of like, well, now I don't know who I am, because he really stripped away like quite a deal, and he realized that so much of who he built himself up to be was for validating purposes. And now he's come to terms with that this is what he's done. And he's let go of a lot of things, but it's kind of like, you know, he cleaned his dry erase board and it's just blank, and he's like, or there's just very few things on there. And he's like, what the fuck am I? Who am I? And, you know, the way he's communicating has me like a little bit concerned, but I'm pretty certain that he's going to be just fine. Because he's now like overthinking this stuff, and you know, it's just habit, you know, because like to go through the analysis, you really gotta think. You gotta think a lot. You gotta write a lot. And so, you know, once you kind of like get to a certain point and you start letting go of a bunch of stuff, those identity forming things, you start peeling off layers of that persona mask, and it's getting thinner and thinner and thinner. You can then just say, well, what do I want to put in its place? How do I want to show up? It's plastic. Now, it's not going to be this immediate shift, right? Because as you took off layers, like peeling off layers or sanding off layers, you have to build it layer by layer, okay? And that's how the calm conviction that I mentioned, that's how it happens. That's how it grows, the calm conviction. Okay, it's just layer by layer. And you don't have these other narratives, you now have these new narratives that are then forming what you believe should be the truth, that you're choosing for your own identity. And this is where it becomes so important to have a strong set of codes and principles and rules that you live by, because that is your lighthouse in the fog. Okay, that's your beacon of light. And other people, they may use religion as the beacon of light. I don't blame them. It's basically a plug and play system. Everything's been done for you a very long time ago. All you got to do is just plug in, follow what the fucking thing says, and you just do it, and everything should be okay. Okay, but that's not me, right? I was raised in a secular family. It just wasn't part of my consciousness growing up. So I never developed this, whatever that muscle is in the mind that allows one to believe in supernatural things. I just didn't grow with that muscle. Okay. So I created my own. I created my own tenets to live by. Instead of just adopting from here or there or following some other system's tenets, I made my own. Why the fuck not? I know what's an ideal good. So that's what I did. And I made that more important than anything else. Just like as someone who's a serious, devout follower of, say, a particular religion, the rules of that religion are top fucking tier. You don't fuck with those rules. Now, you're not going to be perfect because, that's just how people are. But there's an aspiration, a daily aspiration towards reaching those things and being consistent about it. And they don't change, they don't bend, they're not negotiable. You know what I'm saying? It's when say Moses was carving the 10 Commandments, and then the people were following them and reading them after he had, established them. There's no negotiating with these things. You don't negotiate the 10 Commandments. The Buddhists, they don't negotiate the Four Noble Truths or the Eightfold Path. It's just, they're non-negotiable. It's no, this is an integral part of the system that you're choosing to get behind. And so if you make your own, as I did, it has to be equally as non-negotiable. It might as well be carved into a stone tablet as Moses's commandments were. Non-negotiable. And not be afraid of that. Because that's the interesting thing about devout followers of religions, is that their conviction is so strong. Their love for what they're following is so strong. It's great. Because especially these days, you don't, everybody's trolling, everybody's kidding, everybody's afraid to show up really as they are, make a real step forward, because you run the risk of criticism, you run the risk of judgment, and it's so easy to be haha, I was just kidding, I'm just trolling you, I'm not really like this. Or maybe they really are, and they just can't stand on it because their legs are feeble. They lack the ability to stand on their shit. So instead, because they can't emotionally handle the pushback or the criticism, because it's far too valuable. That criticism has power. So instead, they save face, and they're well, I was just kidding, I'm just trolling. And that's just weakness of not being able to stand on your shit. Yeah. Well, you guys just straight up having a good conversation in here. Yep. Let me just see if there's anything here. Hey, we looked at that one. Repeating shit. Oh yeah, this is good. So I think next year, what I'm gonna do, because I'm not gonna do the whole setup thing, it's just as easy to just post the link, right? And just one at a time, if they want to, people can come up. You don't need a camera, right? But you do need a mic, and I won't force people to be on camera. And they can just get up and treat it just like a call, and you ask your question, and then have your dialogue, and then you just go back down. So, but I'll be doing that next year. Yeah, but yeah, you're welcome. Once that starts, as the last show too, well, all of them, everything's tied together, because most guys come into dating and life with what beliefs they picked up about what's supposed to be portrayed. So when challenged, they get reactive. Absolutely. Yep. Yes. PUA. I jokingly do PUA approaches sometimes, and it's normally well received, but that is because I'm not serious. But a PUA would do the same thing, but be serious. This is exactly what I was just talking about. Okay? I jokingly do PUA approaches sometimes. Well, stand on your shit. You know what I'm saying? Like, either stand on your shit as a PUA, or stand on your shit as someone who doesn't take it seriously. Because if you don't take something seriously, why bring it into our lives? Like, I go to the gym, but like, I don't do it seriously. It's like, why the fuck go at all? You're wasting your time. Okay? You're cosplaying because it's kind of fun. Right? I go to work, but like, just jokingly. I run a business, but just jokingly. I make paintings, but just as a joke. Because of fear. We hide behind jokes because we're afraid. So, be convicted. Either be convicted as a PUA and say, yeah, I'm a fucking pickup artist. Right? This is things that I utilize. I believe in them. This is what I choose. Draw the blade. Okay? Or draw the blade on, I don't fuck with that shit. It's a joke. And I don't joke around with things in my life. Again, draw the blade. But saying like, I joke, you know what I mean? What are we, fucking 13? Yeah. Yeah. And it can be, made very simple or be made very complex. It depends on, how you want to look at it. But that said, because I just from that thought alone, I can run on and on. And I'm going to relax because it's almost midnight. Yeah, I'm going to leave it here. So thank you guys for joining me here this evening. Those of you who stuck around, I know some people kind of popped in and out. It's great. I appreciate you. And I hope to see you again. And please take advantage of the discounts that are on the website, thedominance.academy.com, until December 26th. Then everything goes back to the way it was. So right now, student memberships are on a big discount. So get on it, and then we can roll from there. So I think of the way I set it up is there's like an initial cost that's one cost, and then it changes after a month, but it's still not the same as what people are paying right now. So if you want to become a student, now is the time. Okay? Yes. All right. Thank you very much for joining me this evening. Take it easy.